Hello, Brent. Welcome back to another episode of Watching Privacy. What are we on? 5 of this new season, I guess, or
Is it?
4? I don't know.
Maybe. I do recall you missing last time, so
Uh, Trying to give an opportunity for not to steal the show every single time. I felt kind of bad. Whatever. It's the week of May 5th. We'll talk about some news articles. We're missing Raju this week, so everyone's, I guess, travel schedules and work schedules are just picking back up and getting a little crazy. But I think we can dive in. We got a couple good ones to talk about this week. Let's start up with connected TV ad spend expected to hit 21 billion this year, up almost 40% from last year. What a wild number, 40% increase. I mean, when you connected TV ad spend, it's a little unclear. I would imagine they're only talking about smart apps that exist on TVs, and that's kind of where they're going with it. But in general, 40% increase is quite wild. Maybe it's just people working from home and having kind of TVs on in their background or just streaming things all day long. But I mean, to see a 40% increase for smart TVs when, I mean, it's not like we didn't have smart TVs for the past couple of years. Seems a little weird. What did you think of it?
was it a couple of weeks ago we asked, there was an article that said, it was hard to find a dumb TV or something like that. Um, this is the reason why it's hard to find a dumb TV. Look at
Yeah.
the numbers. Look at the money that people are throwing at that because they know, our viewing habits are going through smart TVs. They're able to access our, almost everything we watch when we watch, how much of it we watch. You can't get that from the dumb TVs. So, once again, people are not actually selling or manufacturing. Well, they're manufacturing, but they're not really, first business selling TVs. Their first business is now selling attention and collecting data and selling that and using the TV as just a mechanism for that. Now you see why.
Yeah, I mean these numbers have just growth 57% over 2020 and then another 40% over 2021. Those numbers are just growing extremely fast and they're big numbers too, obviously in the billions. So I don't think it's going down anytime soon. I think TVs are the easiest way to monetize and track people who, either don't know any better or, think that the TV connected is the right way to go. And it's a shame because
Well,
like
let's
you said in the beginning, it's hard to find some dumb TVs.
Yeah, let's face it. I mean, Pete, we're gonna watch stuff. We're gonna watch, the content. If they let us binge it, we're gonna sit and watch it for like 8 hours straight. I've been, guilty of that. If it's live sports, we're gonna watch that at the appointment time. We're gonna do all that. So it's only the smartness that's really changed. We've always wanted good content to watch, and traditionally, if it's a soap opera or if it's a series or if it's a sporting event, we're there for it. Now it's just, they're able to capitalize on it more than ever before because now they're able to, monetize the data. They're able to actually capture the data. So I mean, what was it, Nielsen ratings before that they had to depend on that? Are they even
Mhm.
still in business at this point? Because do you really need Nielsen when you've got, these smart TVs that will actually give you even deeper level data and be able to use that to do whatever you want to do at this point? So yeah, it's 2022 and it's only going to get smarter from here.
Yeah, I mean, I have no doubt that Nielsen's still printing money, but you're right. I mean, the connected TVs and the amount of data you can get off of it compared to like an old Nielsen set-top box or whatever is, obviously tenfold. So I think it'll
And you
just
can
get
get it
worse. And
quicker too, right? I mean, you
yeah,
can literally
instant.
get it as soon as the show is over, it feels like.
Yeah, I remember last year, I think we talked about like Samsung Ad Network or something, where they could retarget you within 30 seconds of the content that you're watching and show dynamic ads within 30 seconds. So obviously, that's lightning fast. And I guess speaking of fast, we can talk a little bit about our friends over at TikTok with short videos. Um, I will tell you, Brent, this was the hardest thing to look up because I saw the title and so I was like, all right, cool. This came from a website called Ad Exchanger. I was like, I don't really trust Ad Exchanger. Maybe they have obviously a lot of information about the advertising industry. Let me find some other sources. So I start searching around online and you start searching TikTok cookies and you realize you can't find a lot of articles about this topic because every time you search for TikTok cookies, all you see is recipes for cookies that people are making on TikTok. So I do got to hand it to these guys. That's a genius thing in general, because I mean, now you basically modeled out any kind of search result you could possibly want for anyone trying to dig up more content on this. And even this article was a little bit on the lighter side. I didn't think it had a lot of depth to it. But the big thing was basically third-party tracking pixels to TikTok. And so I'm not exactly a pro on this. Usually, this is where we would rely on Raju for it. But I'll explain a little bit about how these kind of work and at least my understanding of it. And again, I could be pretty far off base here, but if someone can correct me in the comments or something, that'd be great. But basically, Facebook started this whole thing where, if you remember back in the day, a lot of websites would have kind of like that embedded like button or the thumbs up icon on the web page. And that image that was on the web page wasn't actually an image. It was what's called the JavaScript widget, which basically means it's running some sort of code whenever you load that page up. And so the way Facebook justifies it, or I guess any of these companies really justify it, is that when you look at an ad on Facebook and you click on the advertisement and then you go to whatever website you want to, in this example, let's say David's Bridal, and you end up buying something, it can track basically that you were on Facebook, you clicked on this icon, you went to davidsbridal.com, and then you bought something on davidsbridal.com. Therefore, we can track attribution, which is ultimately what every marketer wants. How much did I spend on this Facebook ad, and how many sales did I generate from that campaign that I ran? TikTok is getting in the same boat because TikTok advertising has been seeing a surge as of late, but they didn't really have a good attribution model for any kind of advertising that they did. You just kind of hope that whatever video or influencer you invested in made a viral video, and you hope that it would lead to some sales, no different than a billboard would or a TV commercial. Very hard to actually track any kind of ROI on. So by them adding this third-party cookie ping, like the screenshot or the quote from the article says, picking up a third-party cookie ping for a site, a visitor to David's Bridal would give TikTok a strong sense that the visitor is in market for a related purchase. So basically, every website that embeds this TikTok tracking pixel will send information back to TikTok for them to build an even bigger behavior profile for the items that you're viewing, the pages that you're visiting, and all that kind of stuff. So basically any brand or any entity essentially that is trying to advertise on TikTok is going to need to put this pixel on their site, which means that TikTok will be collecting just as much information as Facebook has been for a very long time. So even if you're not really a TikTok user today and you visit a bunch of sites that have that tracking pixel on it, and then later on you sign up with TikTok, they can still put all that information together and have a pre-built profile for you, in addition to TikTok's own native algorithm of showing you the videos that you want to see. I think I explained that decently well. Brent, you got any thoughts on the article or even corrections on what I just said?
No, no corrections, man. You know you're on point. But I'm just thinking, in the early days of TikTok, which was what, like a couple years ago. It's not like it was that long ago, really. I think people just like watching stuff without being harassed. You just like to be able to see some funny videos. The dude that does this, that's all. And I understand what TikTok is when you've got like the fastest growing social network and people watch for hours. That's just the sign of how do we monetize more what we do. And so it's gonna be annoying because everybody's gonna start doing this, and then I don't know how long it will be. Somebody's going to create another social network, and it's going to be underground for a while, and it's going to be, less obtrusive than what most of them are, and people gravitate toward it. It's just a cycle. Now, I'm hoping that TikTok finds a way to be less annoying with this, and marshals their advertising customers to we're going to keep you to because this is a perfect opportunity for them to do it since they're at the beginning of this. It's not out of the barn yet. Just try not to be too obtrusive and too annoying. There's money to be made. You don't have to have it all. You don't have to go for it all, because if you go for it all, it just makes people, it gets people to the point where they start rants like this, and then they try to move on to the other thing. I think this is I understand why TikTok is doing it. I think it makes a lot of sense, but let's try to do it in a way that is less annoying than has been done in previous rounds of this, because we know it has to come, but can we be a little less annoying about it? That's all I have to say.
I would love to see your phone's app usage report on how many hours a day you spend on TikTok. Uh, just because there's obviously a lot of passion in that in that little monologue of yours, and that's coming from I would say a place, could be a dark place, but the number of hours could be
I'm only
impacting
looking
it.
for Rams videos, Rams reaction videos. I haven't seen yours on there yet, but wait.
Uh, I'm not. You couldn't convince. You can pay me to put TikTok on my phone, so that's fine. But yeah, I mean, you're right. Like even under, like you mentioned, a lot of times, like in the early days of TikTok, a lot of friends would just tell me that like it's like just a positive place. You go to their funny videos, happy videos, dancing. You kind of chuckle to yourself. Versus like social media, you might get some like crazy person from high school that turned out to be very weird. And on Twitter, you see a bunch of like rando people arguing with each other and just trying to dunk on each other for some points, I guess. And TikTok just was kind of like, all right, we'll go there for like a mind numbing escape kind of thing, right? Which is good for them. But yeah, I mean, I think this will only bolster their advertising, because if advertisers in general are flocking to them without this kind of attribution model, and now you're adding some sort of analytics to it, that's going to be a big game changer, and only mean that TikTok, I would say, advertising and usage is probably going to explode a lot from here, because now videos and advertisements are going to be far more relevant to the users that are actually watching it.
Yeah, last year I think they did their first worldwide user conference, and
TikTok,
yeah, and it
they have
was
user conferences.
well, it was virtual, of course, but it was like the very first time they did it. And the two things that they announced, the big things, e-commerce, so being able to allow their creators to monetize their content via people shopping and buying stuff, and advertising.
Mm,
I'm guessed, and I wish, I would love to know, because, and I'm sure it's probably out there, what percentage of their revenues is ads and what percentage is, other things. Google, I mean, Facebook is still running what, 97% revenue is ad based.
yeah.
I would love to know what TikTok is right now. And then, a couple of years now, as they start implementing these things, what the breakdown becomes.
Yeah, I think actually you hit on a good point here that actually touches on the next article that we got, is cookieless inventory, today's incremental revenue, tomorrow's standard. And so I think the article is a little misleading. It's also from Adweek, who probably has a vested interest in cookies and advertising and all that kind of stuff. But one thing you mentioned just now about the two things they talked about at this user conference for TikTok one was shopping. And so shopping is a pretty big one, that's, I think, taking or getting a lot more notice in general, because this whole cookieless idea is not really cookieless in the sense that that sounds like a nice buzzword basically, but ultimately it's not cookieless. It's really a race to get first party data, and we've talked about this I think in a couple episodes before. I don't, maybe we didn't go too deep into it, but basically first party data is information on that website itself. So for example, every search you do on Google, that's first party data, because you're searching on google.com and Google is the one doing ads. And so it's no actual third party trackers on that site that's monitoring what you do and profiling you. It is Google, because you're on their property. Same thing with YouTube, same thing with Facebook. That's all first party data. And you'll see, or we have seen, a big trend in Google has had shopping embedded on their search results for quite some time now. Instagram has gotten really big into shopping on Instagram. I think there's a dedicated tab, even at the bottom menu bar of Instagram, to be able to shop and buy things directly inside of Instagram, rather than having to link out to a separate website, because then they no longer have first party data if you're leaving the Instagram property. Facebook also has shopping inside of it. Twitter's, I would say, biggest downfalls is not being able to buy things on Twitter itself, but that's a different topic. I'm upset that I missed out on the Twitter conversation.
Maybe your
last
boy
week.
Elon may change that. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? You can just buy a Tesla directly. You just tweet Tesla and say, "Give me one now," and then it'll just know, and it'll just send the car, and you'll get it right away. And so, yeah, in general, this whole like idea of like the more data you can collect on your own property, the less you have to rely on these third-party cookies, which means Apple's app tracking will not really affect you. Google is trying to do away with third-party cookies as well. That won't affect you. And so a lot of these bigger and bigger companies who have that stronghold already have a pretty big leg up here, and it makes it far more difficult for upstarts and smaller companies, especially small businesses, to be able to compete here. Because now, in order to compete, you basically have to build up a presence on each individual island of let's say user demand generation, either that's Google or Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, wherever it is, because they want you to be in that ecosystem of theirs. And I mean, I would say Shopify is kind of the last hope of being like an independent way for people to really have their own storefronts and control kind of their destiny to an extent. But with Shopify and I guess maybe the overall market kind of taking a beating, who knows where that really kind of ends up. Same thing with Amazon, I guess. I kind of forgot to mention them, but they're the kind of kings of first party data based on all the searches and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I mean, going back off this rant, but cookieless inventory doesn't really mean cookieless. It's really just all about first party cookies and how bigger brands can establish multiple properties online in order to control as much of that user data as they can and not have to share it with anybody else. That's also why you kind of see these like streaming platforms coming from, I guess, short-lived CNN, but even like a couple of their software companies are making streaming platforms or learning platforms and stuff like that, where
Yeah.
they control the means of distribution and all the data that goes with it, rather than having to rely on maybe YouTube analytics and embedding that back over. You own it all, and that's really what they all want. Go ahead,
And
Brent.
by the way, CNN Plus, yeah, you don't have to worry about that one anymore. All right,
Is
so
this is the city of Atlanta going to be okay? I feel like it must have rocked you to the core.
those were the roughest 2 days that. No, I'm just kidding. I think you look at some of the companies you named. Let's talk about marketplaces. Companies like Amazon and a host of others. I mean, all the others really. They built the marketplace, so all the activity really takes place on that property. And many of those customers, even if you're a seller and you sold to a customer on a marketplace that you don't own, chances are you don't get the contact information, the actual customer information. You can't market directly to them based on you being on the marketplace. And I think the biggest challenge for a lot of the smaller retailers or people trying to sell online is you have to play with the big marketplaces because that's where the traffic is, that's where all the people
Right.
are. But you have to find a way to get that information through content creation, getting them to come to your website, sign up for your newsletter or your discount text message. And I think that's the hardest part for a lot of these folks. They don't have access to the data. Even when a customer buys something from them, they don't have they immediately don't have access to that information. So I think it's a challenge that it's going to be, you know, still coming for them. Even as the privacy thing rifles through and these platforms adjust for that, the first party data thing is critical because it gives you the opportunity to speak directly to a customer or prospect without having to go through one of those intermediaries.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's you said it spot on. I'm not really sure what could be done to change because I think the bigger players have kind of cemented their places, and it's every every regulation they generally like the people that make the regulation is coming from big players who are going to protect their incumbent status, right? So that also makes it even harder for disruption going forward. Even though we kind of all want it, it becomes harder to do.
But the good part is, I mean, let's put it like this: there are some of these platforms are handling pieces of the business that folks really don't do well or don't want to do well. Like,
Hmm.
if you don't want to do fulfillment, you don't have to do fulfillment. If you don't want to have to do payment, you don't have to do payment. But you can piece this together and it could work for your benefit if you work on building your brand. And I'm not the biggest dude on the brand stuff, but if you're able to focus on your core business and also building a first party kind of interaction channel, then you are able to capture that information. You're able to do something with it. So yeah, it's a tough kind of marketplace, so to speak, but I don't see it getting any less uh, difficult. But I see it. There's opportunities for folks who are able to at least put the pieces that they need to in place that they aren't good at and don't want to focus on. If they actually take that time and you start doing first party interaction, direct to consumer kind of stuff that allows you to then begin collecting the information, and then being able to use that to further engage. It's tough. It's a tough situation, but there are
Yeah.
ways to start addressing it, I guess.
Yeah, I don't want to go too far off away from the privacy tangent, but a couple of things you said, I feel like I'll share a few thoughts on. So, like, there's been a massive rise over the past maybe decade or so of this whole, direct to consumer brands. We saw, I think, a week or two ago, we talked about how a lot of these stocks and valuations were getting hit pretty hard because of advertising. And oftentimes people will like you said, there's parts of a company that people don't want to deal with, like maybe fulfillment or whatever, right? The way I kind of see it is you kind of need to know about all of these things because once you start outsourcing it to other companies, then it's kind of like out of your control. And people will always say, I think like the textbook MBA thing is like focus on your core competencies and let somebody else deal with everything else, right? And that only gets you so far. And I think that's kind of maybe part of like this whole culture of like get make it big quickly, which is outsource as much as you can. Focus on like your quote brand building, which is all these like you'll start seeing ads for like $90 pieces of underwear or like t-shirts that are $80, and they're like you'll see all sorts of Instagram ads for them and everything. And it's not like you're really making that high of a quality thing, but they're focusing on this whole brand building and advertising. And so they're basically just advertising companies. Raju has like the best phrase about it, where he basically says, is someone a sales company that happens to make products, or they're a product company that happens to sell it? Or same way, a lot of these brands have become advertising companies where marketers are basically driving the entire thing. They don't really care about product innovation. They don't really care about product quality. There's to an extent to maintain the customers they get, but it's all about growth, which comes from marketing, not necessarily good products or owning the entire manufacturing process to control every input and output and make sure that it's to their specifications. So there's definitely like I think two sides of the coin on that. Ultimately, whatever rant, it's still gonna be the way it is. I think people still love the idea of brands and associating with some sort of an identity because of some small logo. Ultimately, gives some sort of, I would say, attachment to that brand, and you resonate with it, which is what a lot of this branding is. But I guess it has its pros and cons in general. But yeah, let's go back to privacy before we go too far off the deep end. This other one, Grindr user data was sold through ad networks. I think we touched on this last year at some point where there was like this priest or bishop or someone in the church, let's call it, I don't know, that basically got caught because someone had bought like some data from Grindr, I believe, and exposed it. So like someone in that one church, I don't know what church it was, but whatever, some church. And then this guy got outed basically for being on the app and being like that. And so this article kind of surfaced back up. I think it's from Wall Street Journal exclusive, I guess. It's not that exclusive because we talked about this. I mean, even the headline says sold since 2017. That's not really an exclusive if you're 5 years late to the story. So whatever, beyond the point. Anyways, so these apps are selling data, and there's obviously like sensitive topics that you would think that these companies that focus on something like Grindr, which is for like a certain community and obviously wants to protect them, embrace them, give them an opportunity or an area to thrive, which is all great. And then for that same company to like betray their users' trust and sell data to anybody, it just seems so wrong. Like, I mean, I'm sure going into a more privacy friendly mode would be extremely beneficial for both user trust and business growth because it is a sensitive topic and people, I would say, want a lot of privacy. And then kind of like this quote on the screen says here from the article, it says, even in countries where being gay is legal, it can still remain a blackmail threat for those not living openly. The US government intervened to force Chinese company into divesting itself from Grindr on national security grounds in 2019. So basically, you knew that the Chinese company was invested in Grindr, which means the Chinese government has all the data that Grindr has, which means your information is now in the hands of the Chinese government, which could be used in a lot of different ways. And so it just seems really good. The last line here basically was like a one sentence paragraph. The risks really aren't hypothetical because I think this is a bad. I would say just a bad move by leadership and management of that company. I can't say it any other way. There's no way to really justify selling your user data on such a sensitive platform like that. I mean, I don't know. It just seemed kind of wrong.
It goes back to I think a couple of things that Raju has said over the lifetime of this show, probably before that. Who's the real customer of Grindr? Is it the people using the app, or is it the folks wanting to buy the data from the people using the app? And so, that if Grinder is selling that data, if they were really looking out for their users, as you would hope that they would, they might have been a little bit more apprehensive to make the sale of this data, because it doesn't take, Stevie Wonder could see this, and I'm being a little funny, but it's not a huge leap to see that this data is going to be really of interest to people, and they're going to be interested in it for a number of reasons, and interested enough to buy it. And them offering that data and letting these folks buy it is a definite negative impact to the actual users of the app. So once again, it just feels like, are you who are your customers? Who are you really looking out for? What experience are you trying to provide? And what's the long-term relationship you want to have with your customers? Because if you took all of that into consideration, you would be more about safeguarding this as opposed to putting it out and selling it on the open market.
I mean, in their defense, whenever someone signs up, I'm sure they read the terms and conditions line by line. So they would be very aware that the information was subject to being shared or sold with whatever business partners for whatever current and future needs. And so,
Yeah.
but speaking of buying data, this was also a curveball, I thought. The CDC
Mm.
bought access to your location data. And this came out, I think, just earlier this week. And I thought this story was wild because I'm just going to read this paragraph, which quotes from the documents. So the CDC lists 21 uses for location data that included monitoring curfews, visits between neighbors, visits to schools, pharmacies, and places of worship, as well as monitoring people's mobility patterns. The CDC also wanted the location data for public health research by tracking travel to parks and green spaces, physical activity, and mode of travel. And population migration before, during, and after natural disasters. Would be made data collected would be made available across the agency to support numerous CDC priorities. And so I would tell you like 10 different red flags here. First is if you can't really specify what you're using the data for, you shouldn't have to collect it. I think that's part of GDPR basically, right?
Yep.
And so here, when you just say that support numerous CDC priorities, what does that even mean? Secondly, why the CDC is blowing $500,000 on this data when the government already has it from the NSA tracking all of us anyway? I don't understand. Maybe the left hand of the government needs to talk to the right hand. Seems kind of pointless to spend the money on it.
Or
Third of all,
Or maybe it's just easier to go and get it and buy it outside and then go through protocols across intergovernmental agency communications, right?
yeah, exactly. And I mean, if you want to go down like maybe a hypothetical rabbit hole, imagine like back in like the 80s with AIDS and HIV. If the CDC bought Grinder data at that point to maybe track it when it was tightly correlated, or I guess not obviously not correlated, but assumed to be correlated through gay people, right? And now you've basically got government organizations buying data that's meant to be private, and they could say it's being used to support numerous CDC priorities. Whether they're actually real ones or not, you have no idea. And I mean, ultimately, monitoring curfews, visits to schools, visits to church, visit to mobility patterns, all this seems a lot. And so I don't know if the article actually dug into how much data they bought. I would say for $500,000, they probably got a good amount, but maybe they did, maybe they don't. But in general, I mean, it's just it's not a good look overall. So
The thing that was the most striking out of this paragraph is they name all of the data they want, and pretty detailed. But then when it got to what they're going to use it for, it was very nebulous. Support numerous CDC priorities, which are, I mean, you can get detailed about the data you want, but you don't get detailed about what you're going to do with it. That's always the problem here. It's this recurring theme. We want to grab all the data we can, and we'll figure out what we'll do with it as we go along. It's terrible.
You want to hear the kicker to the story, Brent? So the CDC bought this data from a company called SafeGraph, And for our loyal listeners out there, SafeGraph is basically this company that sells obviously a bunch of user data. And we talked about it a couple episodes ago where Google actually banned SafeGraph from being in their app store. So that's how basically terrible this company is, that even Google, the king of tracking, said, I don't want this other tracking company installed in apps that are distributed in my app store. And so somehow that's the like good company that the CDC ended up partnering with to get this data. And so even from this article, there's another quote that I don't have a slide for, but it basically says location data is supposed to be anonymous, but it could be used to be quite simple. It could be quite simple to pinpoint identity of an individual through user information that's available. And we all know about anonymized data and de-anonymized data from multiple times we've talked about this. But overall, I mean, one, I would say, even if you bought the data, I would hope you did something good with it. I think this
Yeah.
US or maybe even worldwide, I don't really know any of this like COVID tracking exposure stuff they kind of built into the iOS platform and Google platforms, even on mobile. It was meant to be like a whole easy way to track things. I don't even know if that ever really worked. Like there's some countries out there that actually did, COVID tracing very well. But for all this talk of like technology, we know exactly who people are interacting with and we can track their patterns, didn't really actually do anything because I don't think any tracing apps work. Do you, Brent? Remember that was like a big hype for a while. Like we're going to be able to trace everybody and we'll know, and you'll opt into it. All privacy secure. Apple was like touting this thing, and then just nobody used it. Like it just never became a thing. And I mean, I don't know if that was just like bad adoption or bad implementation or design, but clearly nobody used it because that's why the CDC had to go out and buy this data in the first place, right? I mean,
I don't know. I just once again I go back to where it really does feel like we're in the 1840s and 50s. This must be what the gold rush felt like, because everybody plays loose and fast. They're just trying to get their hand on as much data, this term, I mean gold, which is data today, as possible before any regulations hit. And even the government, I mean, you said it so correctly. Why would they have to go outside and buy this if it was
uh,
easily available internally?
well, who knows? We'll hit on the last one. This was, I would say, maybe we just got it. We didn't even find a positive story to talk about this week, Brent. So we'll have to do better next week. But on the flip side of the Grinder story,
Yeah.
I would say equally abhorrent is this story where it basically says data broker is selling location data of people who visit abortion clinics. And the worst is the subheading says it costs just $160 to get a week's worth of data on where people who visited Planned Parenthood came from and where they went afterwards. $160 is not a lot of money. And let's go back to our friend SafeGraph, who is also part of the story, naturally. So these guys were involved in both the CDC thing and this abortion clinic thing. Overall, not very good. I mean, maybe SafeGraph, we got to do a deep dive on these folks and figure out just how bad they are. But maybe they're even up in our hall of shame with Clearview at this point because
Oh
they're not
wow.
really doing anything too hot here.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is just, I mean, I'd say equally bad, if not worse um, than the Grinder story, because the information shouldn't be being shared like that. I guess, I mean, I would say probably in their, I wouldn't call it defense, but in their line of reasoning is you basically can set any kind of venue. Let's say you had a store, a restaurant, and you wanted to track users who came and left from your restaurant and buy that data would make sense. But and maybe you want to do that for your competitors. So I'm sure there's some reason that people will just plug in an address of a Planned Parenthood location and get it that way. But I mean, I don't know. Maybe certain things should be like blocked out, or certain sensitive areas shouldn't be allowed to be tracked that way. Who knows? But you could see the business reasoning where like that wasn't really what we meant to do. It's not like we really had like a Planned Parenthood, filter or something like that. But it's just the way people use the system. But maybe that's not a good enough excuse. Maybe people need to do a better job at kind of limiting certain pieces of information that are meant to be what should all be private, but should be even considered more sensitive, right?
Yeah. I mean, we talk a lot about how data is being thrown around and bought all over the place. When it comes to this, like you said, such sensitive data and personal data, I mean, me buying something off a website, that's personal, but not to the level of this kind of stuff. And so when you see, once again, you know, government organizations going to these companies uh, with getting data and how these companies are getting the data to give it out or sell it, it's even more concerning because you know uh, this Supreme Court decision has ripple effects, and people will leverage the data in ways that could be very harmful to people. um, Even if the intent for some folks to use the data, like you said, is good, there are other folks who are going to use it in ways that are probably not going to be very good for the people who, let's face it, they had certain procedures done hoping that it was going to be done in confidence and that their data is going to be respected, as long as with them being respected, particularly at a very vulnerable time that they had this happen. And here now, all of a sudden, years later, it could come back and haunt them. And then, of course, people who are going through certain things now are is going to be used to prevent them potentially from doing what they want to do or need to do. So this is a very disconcerting kind of story.
Yeah, I mean, digging into the article a little bit more, there's another line that I just kind of popped out to me was SafeGraph just classifies Planned Parenthood as a quote brand that can be tracked. And so you can purchase data to more than 600 locations around the US. And, a week's worth of data costs $160, like I said originally. And, it says the motherboard, the website that the article is from, also search SafeGraph website for family planning, which returned relevant result of family planning centers that people could then buy data related to. So I stand corrected that that's an actual category of data that people are being allowed to target. Ultimately, maybe SafeGraph is just kind of, they know they're on the ropes here. They're getting banned by Google. Apple could be next. How much can we sell? Let's just have a fire sale and get it all out there. Otherwise, the data is kind of useless. Or they have to get bought by somebody and find a way to negotiate something. But I mean, yeah, I think SafeGraph might just enter our hall of shame here with Clearview, because I think they're like showing up in so many of these articles and it's just not very good.
Definitely not a good week, that's for sure.
You didn't have any positive stories that you can think of?
Let's just end now. I have nothing for you, man. Oh, by the way, did you know the Rams won the Super Bowl? There you go. There's the positive story.
Oh, no, I don't. All right, that's the end of it. Thanks for joining. We'll be back maybe next week, or yeah, I'm sure we'll be back next week. I'm not going to be here, but somebody else will probably show up, or you'll just maybe have a tour of Brent's closet and see all of the clothes and everything that he has there. Anyways, thanks for joining. We'll be back again next week, and as always, let me throw this bad boy up there. Like, share, subscribe, because we're getting numbers now, and so we're not the I would say lame YouTube channel that we were before. We're pretty active. Facebook, Twitter, or not Facebook actually, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn we're pretty big on. So you can just search for us and find us there. If you have comments, articles you want to drop to us, things you want to bring to our attention, let us know. And otherwise, we'll be back again next week. Let me see if I can drop this. And